Putin's complete failure. Ukraine is ready to keep fighting for years to come. Sikorski slammed the Kremlin. The world's second army are losers. The EU and Poland are back in action. Billions and weapons for Kyiv. Russians are gasping for breath with an 80% decline across industries, something not seen even in the turbulent 90s. I'll share all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Putin is on the verge of a breakdown. Ukraine is ready for a 3-year war. Sikorski made a loud statement about the world's second army. Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski is confident that Ukraine can withstand the pressure for another 3 years, while Putin is showing a complete failure at the front.
Ukraine is planning for a 3-year war, while these colonial wars usually last about 10 years. I don't think Putin will be able to hold out for another 3 years. We are going to provide Ukraine with the means to resist using frozen Russian assets. Currently, Ukraine produces half of its own drones and missiles.
According to Sikorski, the Russian dictator Putin has completely failed in the war against Ukraine.
Putin turned out to be weaker than we thought. We thought he had the second strongest army in the world. And he himself was convinced that it would all be limited to a coup, a walk in the park, a 3-day operation. And now, he has been fighting in Donbass for more than 10 years already. It's hard to call that a victory.
The head of Poland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs also called on the EU to take a more active role in facilitating negotiations regarding a future peaceful settlement.
I hope the United States will continue to provide Ukraine with intelligence. Of course, Poland pays for Starlink terminals, ammunition for American weapons intended for air defense, and long-range strikes are also important.
As we can see, aid to Ukraine from Poland is only increasing. What exactly will be sent to the front lines in the near future by our neighbors and main partners to successfully repel enemy attacks? Find out right now.
More than 120 billion zlotys or $4 billion. That's the impressive amount Poland has spent on aid to Ukraine since the start of the full-scale invasion. This includes both humanitarian and military support.
Poland was one of the first countries to provide Ukraine with tanks, ammunition, and defense equipment on a large scale. In 2022 to 2023, it delivered, among other things, more than 300 tanks, as well as armored personnel carriers, artillery systems, air defense systems, drones, mortars, assault rifles, and over 100 million rounds of ammunition. 10 airplanes and 10 helicopters were also sent to Ukraine. From 2022 to 2024, Poland provided Ukraine with 47 packages of military aid. The value of the equipment delivered in 2022 alone amounted to 7.23 billion zlotys, and in 2023 to 2024, another 5.63 billion. Poland also supplied more than 19,500 Starlink terminals, providing the armed forces of Ukraine with stable satellite communication. This accounted for almost half of all terminals used in Ukraine by the end of 2023.
Poland's assistance to Ukraine is not the result of some romantic enthusiasm, but is very pragmatic. Our neighbors understand that if Ukraine falls, Poland will be next in line. After all, a fighting Ukraine gives Europe time to better prepare for threats. This time is needed, and we have no right to waste a single minute. We will be held accountable for every minute. 318 tanks were delivered to Kyiv by Warsaw. Among them are modernized T-72s, M1R, 591, and Leopard 2 tanks. This is more than anyone else has provided. The total value of gratuitous aid, including training, logistics, repairs, and medical support, exceeded $4 billion by March of this year. Specifically, in 2022, it amounted to $1.6 billion, and in 2023 to 2024, $1.3 billion. Poland also provided assistance.
Military aid from Poland: 586 armored vehicles, 137 artillery systems, 10 Mi-24 helicopters, 10 MiG-29 fighter jets, 287 man-portable air defense systems, 44 air-to-air missiles, over 100 small arms, 89 mortars, 4 Grad multiple launch rocket systems, and more than 100 million rounds of ammunition.
In addition to gratuitous aid, in just 2022 to 2023, Ukraine purchased weapons from Poland worth more than 2.2 billion euros. The largest contract was a deal for 54 Kyiv self-propelled howitzers. Of these, 36 have already been delivered. The countries are establishing joint production of weapons and equipment. The parties agreed on the joint production of 125mm tank ammunition. There are also plans for joint production of other weapons and military equipment, including the placement of Polish companies' manufacturing facilities in Ukraine.
The industry needs to be mobilized. Polish and Ukrainian industries should make joint investments, not only during the war, but also to develop their deterrence potential. These initiatives are very much needed. It is also very important for us to improve economic relations. We will continue to support Ukraine.
Poland has become the main hub for supplying weapons to Ukraine. Also during the war, more than 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been trained on Polish territory. With each year of the war, the assistance and cooperation between Poland and Ukraine only grows stronger.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Moreover, the EU is becoming even more involved in the confrontation with Russia and is transferring almost 6 billion euros to Ukraine. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, stated that now is the time for the European Union to give new momentum in order to expose the cynical attempt by Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin to buy time and bring him to the negotiating table.
We must continue to increase the cost of war for Russia, also because the traces of war are becoming increasingly obvious and visible in the Russian economy. I welcome the commitments of the European Council to ensure Ukraine's financial needs for the next 2 years.
Earlier, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also said that Ukraine is ready to fight Russia for another 2 or 3 years.
President Zelensky told me that he hopes the war will not last 10 years, but Ukraine is prepared to fight for another 2 or 3 years.
Tusk emphasized that Ukraine has the right to attack Russian targets anywhere. The war in Ukraine is causing massive damage to the economy of the Russian Federation. The Russian economy believes that, in the long run, the Polish Prime Minister has no real chance of survival. And now it is facing problems, especially after the new US sanctions. Industry is on its last legs. 80% of Russia's sectors are slipping into decline. Russian industry is rapidly losing momentum, and the consequences of a war of attrition are finishing off the country's economy. The central bank has predicted that Russia will experience its worst economic downturn since the 1990s.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion, and statements about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts.
There's really no other way to describe it, quite simply. But this is not our choice. We do not want things to develop this way.
Putin is trying to bluff and save face by creating an image of success. But it's all in vain. The Russian economy is rapidly going downhill. Almost 80% of the country's industry has fallen into recession.
When we talk about individual sectors, it means that production in these sectors compared to the same period, usually the previous year, has gotten worse. In other words, things aren't improving, they're getting worse. And recession is exactly that, worsening when you're in the negative. When a recession becomes prolonged, that is, when it lasts not just 1 year, but say 3 or 4 years of decline, then it's no longer a recession, it's a depression.
Finally, in September, the overall growth of industrial production in Russia slowed to 0.3% year-on-year. That's almost 19 times less than last year.
There aren't enough people, and there simply aren't enough financial resources or funds to pay for the delivery of components for the purchase of the goods you need for processing, so as a result you end up producing less. And when you produce less, there you have it. A recession, a negative compared to the previous period.
The sharpest decline is seen in those civilian sectors that were supposed to replace the products of foreign companies that left Russia after the start of the full-scale war.
It's a collapse of import substitution. There were plans to replace everything, but to do that, you have to produce what you'll use as a substitute. And if you don't produce what you need to substitute, then how are you going to do it? Substitution with imported products when you're not doing anything yourself. So, of course, any decline in the economy means this. It means that goods are not being produced. If they're not being produced, then there's no point in keeping the people who make them, and that's unemployment. Unemployment is always an unpleasant story.
In fact, the domestic market is deprived of mass consumer goods, and Russian factories are unable to make up for the shortage.
Even now, it would seem the military sector, or at least part of it, which is the production of weapons and ammunition, in September of this year, compared to last September, Russia is down 1.3%. So even the production of weapons and ammunition is already in decline, let alone the rest of the economy, which is showing even worse results.
The central bank has predicted that Russia could face its worst economic downturn since the 1990s if sanctions are tightened. If the situation does not improve, by 2026 the Kremlin could lose $108 billion in export revenues.
Here, the problems are, let's say, still gaining momentum, but the first sign we're seeing is that taxes in Russia have been rising since the beginning of the year. The implementation fee will take effect on December 1st. The environmental tax is set to increase almost tenfold starting November 1st, in just a week or even a couple of days. It turns out that all these various economic problems are cropping up more and more often, and they're constantly making the news because, it's a zugzwang when you don't have any good options.
Russian Sberbank, following Gazprom, has begun mass layoffs. In the first quarter, the staff of the largest bank, which holds half of all individual deposits, decreased by 8,600 employees, in the second quarter by 3,500, and in the third by 1,500.
From Sberbank of Russia, just quoting the head of Sberbank, Herman Gref, he says that throughout 2025, there is not a single new investment project that Sberbank is working on. So the people responsible for this area are not doing anything. And since they're not doing anything, there's no point in paying them a salary, so they're being laid off. That's why laying people off is a demonstration that there is no demand for the economic functions that Sberbank provides. And accordingly, these people are cut. But this is just one of many examples.
That's the reality. Only Putin is trying to cover it all up. But there's nowhere left to hide. The economy is cracking. The country is losing money. We're waiting for your comments. There's more to come. Stay tuned for the main news and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above.